So I did this crazy thing last week where I went to a conference and presented. I walked out on stage with literally no idea what I was going to present at all. I mean, I knew it was going to be about CSS Grid and design and layouts, and I knew I was going to do a live demo, but I didn't have any idea what I was going to do. And it was so much fun, and it seems to be blowing up on Twitter this week, that I thought, hey, why don't I do that again? So at this moment, I literally have no idea what I'm about to do. Miriam does. So Miriam's going to give me a flash drive, the magic of whatever this is.
Have fun.
And I have to remember how to operate USB. So in here, what happened, if you are familiar with my work, I've been doing research over the last 5 years, pulling a lot of examples from elsewhere in the world, including graphic design books. And so that's what I did with this, is I pulled a bunch of graphic design examples. I pulled 15 of them, and I sent them to Chris Coyer, who did what Miriam just did for me this week. He did that last week. He picked one, wrote the HTML. She picked one, another one, a different one, wrote the HTML, pulled images and fonts. And let's see what then happens. Where am I putting this? In Labs, in Generate. Ta-da! So I don't know what this is. This is a really bad idea. Why did I decide to do this again? Whew. All right, so copied over. Ta-da! Let's see. So this is the image. Wait, that's not the image. Where's the image? Source. Here we go. This is in. That's a demo. So, okay, let's look over here. So this. Oh gosh. Are we allowed to curse in this? So this is the layout that I've been given, the idea of the layout, which comes from this page on inside, I don't know, click. Inside this book, Editorial Design, which I really love this book. It's a great book. I highly recommend it if you're looking for, great computer, go ahead, crash. If you're looking for like inspiration or ideas or how to learn more about editorial design or how to think about graphic design in a way that we've just not been doing on the web, because on the web we've been stuck in this world where everything had to be laid out using floats. And floats are not intended to do whole page layout. They're not intended to do all kinds of awesome component layouts. They're just floats. So now that we're in a new world of being able to do a lot more, we really do want to think about, well, wait, what? Graphic design? And for anybody who maybe hasn't had a chance to go to graphic design school or something, reaching out to other books. I didn't go to graphic design school or art school, so I've been sort of doing a self-taught MFA. I call it a self-taught MFA. I'm homeschooling myself at home by reading books like this one. So here, let's look at this example. In fact, I'm going to open it in Photoshop. What I want to do today is sort of show you my thinking process. And that's why I don't know ahead of time what I'm planning to do, because I want to sort of show you the super raw thinking process that I have when I'm by myself and not when I'm sitting in front of, I don't know, lots of people acting like, yeah, I'm on the CSS working group. I know what I'm doing. All right, so, oh gosh. All right, let's see what we have for HTML. Is this the HTML file? Yes, so I'm going to actually rename this index, because index.html is magical, and it will, boom, show up in the web browser. So this is what we have in the web browser right now. I'm in Firefox. I'm in Firefox Nightly. I'm in the same Firefox Nightly that you could use if you want to. And we're going to look at, why did I pick hard images? I should have just only picked simple images, because so grids are our friends. There's clearly some kind of big, well, let's make this bigger, so bigger, so we can all read it, including me. So there we go. Oh, look at these spans. Thank you, Miriam. H1, spans. Grid are our friends. It's because she knows we're going to need those spans. And then we've got this little, discussing the importance of analog techniques. All right, so this little tagline. Ooh, look at those nice classes. And then there's all this content. There's an image, right? There's this image of this person. And then there's, aside. Write down or sketch everything that comes across your mind. Ooh, I was like, is that a note for me into what to do I'm supposed to do during my presentation? No, okay, so this little aside right here, oh, you can't see arrows, but this little, no, anyway, you get the idea. And then the main is all of the content. Okay, so, and then I have a CSS file. Let's see what's going on in our CSS file. We've got, oh, nice, the little remedy, starter, box sizing, border box, and body of margin 0, because that just gets us like into 2019 instead of whatever, 2003. So you know what I'm going to do? Also, by the way, my CSS is going to be horribly misorganized. Do not take this as recommendations of what to do. Because sometimes I do that. Sometimes like I don't know what I'm doing. I can't figure things out. I worry about how I'm going to structure the CSS later maybe. I give myself permission to be super messy because I'm in a more creative experience and I just want to like play and experiment, and also you're all looking at me. So it's going to be weird. But I'm just going to take all of this content. I'm just going to display none it for a minute. And I'm just going to think about this image and these big words. And let's go ahead and we'll do this text too. And we'll think about this part later. So the first thing I start thinking about when I'm thinking about CSS Grid is like, where am I going to put the lines? Like, so I'm going to clearly need some kind of line here. Why does Photoshop not want to work for me? I'm in the brush tool. Do I need this to be bigger? I usually use Monosnap for this actually, but Monosnap is totally broken on my computer right now, so we're not doing that. Anybody suggestions? Opacity is 100%, smoothing, whatever, that doesn't matter. I guess I could use, let's go like this. What do you mean in curves?
Your layer looks, yeah, are you on the right layer?
Yeah, let's find out. All right, well I'll do that if nothing else. There we go, okay, good. Sorry, live demos are not a waste of time. History. Okay, so probably we'll want a line here. If you notice that, like, this word R reaches down, like there's an overlap between the image and the thing, so we're probably going to want a line here and another line here, and they're going to be like 1, 2, 3. Now my brush is way too big, but we're going to need to start, we're going to need a way to start this word here probably, so that might be this might be line 4, and another line that goes here. This is going to be line 5, and these should, I should extend these all the way across. And we're probably going to need something here, which is going to be 6. I don't know that we'll need to end this. Probably we probably won't need that. But we're definitely going to need a way to start this here. So maybe those are our rows, maybe. And then let's think about columns. So maybe we're going to start a column about here. And I think that word grid and this little side text are lining up pretty much with each other. At least we're going to pretend like they do for this purpose. And then we're going to need a way to start this image, right? Like this is going to be line 2. We're probably going to have another one coming along through here. This will be line 3. Oh, I guess we need one here. This is line 4. We're going to need one here. This is going to be line 5. All right, so the next thing we need to figure out is well, that grid is not going to be a grid that applies to the entire page. A lot of the frameworks or the grid, the way we've been doing grids, if you talk to somebody about, oh, I have a grid for my website and it's 2010, probably what you were talking about is some sort of 12-column symmetrical grid. Maybe you're using 960.js or one of the many responsive versions of that. Or nowadays, most people are using the grid framework that's built into Bootstrap. Basically, they were all the same. They're all like, take it, divide it by 12, make some space between things in magic, because 12 is better, because somebody said so 40 or 70 years ago. those things, those grid frameworks applied to everything on the page. There wasn't actually a grid there. We just pretended that there was a grid. We sort of made a grid by making everything have a certain width and be a certain amount of space from each other. It was just sort of a convention that we used to make things look like they were lined up. Now we actually have a tool that lines things up. It really does line things up, but it only lines things up for its own direct children. So if you've used Flexbox, if you've coded Flexbox, you're familiar with this. How many people, by the way, here write CSS? How many of you are people who write CSS? So many of you. How many of you do not write CSS and you're a designer or you're some another content person, a person who, OK. Hello, people. You are also welcome. This talk is not to make you feel like you should write CSS, although you may want to learn it. Maybe you don't. That's fine. But I do think that the work that I've been doing in all the videos that I make is really for designers as well, because for you to really design to our medium, it helps for you to understand it. You don't have to remember any of the code stuff, but you want to be able to go into a meeting with a developer who's telling you, that idea looks nice, I guess, but we can't do that. It's the web. The web doesn't work that way. And you want to go, yes, it does. It does now. I know it does. Here, reference footnote. And be able to get the designs you want, get your creative juices flowing, get some new ideas going about what's possible. That you could actually do some kind of crazy layout like what's on the left page of this spread here, because we can do these things now. And not just on very fragile, one-off examples of a website, but a template file that's used over and over again that changes so that the next time when the words in the headline are different, instead of the word grid, it's some other German word or something gets translated and it's a much longer word, that the layout's fine. It's the same CSS for both layouts. It doesn't matter. You don't have to hand bespoke each little thing. Sometimes we get to do that, but most of the time we don't. Most of the time we're designing components, we're designing templates. And you want it to be flexible, you want it to be robust, you want it to work all the time. The other thing that we're not going to be doing at all, I hope, anymore, is using JavaScript for layouts. Because JavaScript for layouts is super slow. A lot of advertising agencies love to do that. A lot of folks in New York, in fact, work at big advertising agencies. Perhaps you do. And sometimes there's all this creativity and all this beautiful graphic design. But then the website itself is crappy because you're trying to scroll and there's all this stuff and it won't scroll and it jitters and stuff's lazy loading and it's horrible, right? So for many of us, myself included, slow performance is bad, and no matter how beautiful the layout is, you don't get to do it. Up until Grid shipped 2 years ago now, a lot of the ideas we had you could only do if you used JavaScript. And so people did, and it was bad. And now you don't have to. Now we can do this whole thing in CSS. We can do it in a robust way, an accessible way. This markup, this HTML, is written to be accessible, to work really well on a screen reader. So those are our underlying fundamental principles. Now we're going to look at where to put this grid, because it's just going to apply to the direct child, the container and the direct children. So I want to lay out, oh man, all right, already we're in trouble. I want to lay out these words. She's laughing because she knows. I want to lay out these words. Grids are our friend. I also have this image and this text here, and the markup is, I assume it's done pretty well. So here, grids are our friends. That's in H1. The fact that we have these spans is kind of evil, but we're going to live with a little bit of evilness. If I put the grid on this H1, then I can lay out these 4 words, but I can't lay out this paragraph or this image on that same grid. So I probably really need to put the grid on the header, and then I can lay out this H1 as a whole thing, and I can lay out this paragraph and I can lay out this image, but I can't lay out both. So now I have a choice. So now the question is, do we want to live in the past, recent past, or do we want to live in the future? Would you like to live in the recent past, or would you like to live in the future? Yeah, I think let's go for the future. So we're going to take this. This is Firefox Nightly. We're going to quit it. And we're going to come over here to a different copy of Firefox Nightly that is not public yet. And we're going to open it. Are we going to open it? We're going to open it. Is Finder really this buggy right now? I'm running a screen recording software in the background, so. Oh, there we go, good. Please work. So this is a different copy of Firefox Nightly. It's not public yet, and we'll probably experience why in a few minutes. But let's go for it. So we're going to go, this will be shipped, I don't know when, sometime this summer, spring, sometime. Maybe next week, maybe in 2 months, I don't know. But I just went to this place called about:config. It's like a secret door in all of Firefox, but I especially like going through the secret door when you're in Firefox Nightly. And there's a thing here that says, watch out, and you just say, yeah, whatever, it's fine. And then we're in like secret back behind the scenes place, and we're going to type in the word subgrid, and it's going to see that there's this like flag, layout.css.grid-template-subgrid- blah, blah, who cares? False. We're going to make it true. So we just turned on subgrid in Firefox Nightly. This might actually be the first public demo of subgrid ever. So what that's going to do is it's going to let us put a grid on this header and lay out the H1, lay out the P, and lay out the image, and also lay out the grandchildren, theoretically. So let's see if that's actually true. I coded my first ever thing using subgrid about 4 hours ago, sitting at that table. So display, grid, time. OK, I got 27 minutes. Let's see. Display grid. So we're going to go back to our example and see what happens if we say display grid. Did anything change? Also, here's another reason to be in Firefox. Firefox has these dev tools that nobody else has. So if you use developer tools, you're probably very familiar with the idea that you've got here on the left, and we're in this inspector, it's called in Firefox. We can see our HTML. We can see that there's this header with the H1. We can see that the spans are inside the paragraph, the image, right? This is super helpful. And then here we've got our CSS. And in fact, we can type stuff in here. We can change the color of the text or whatever by typing it in here. Oh, by the way, there's also this changes panel that we just added that's in Firefox Nightly that lets you see a list of all the changes that you've made, where right now, like as if it were something like Git or version control. It's not, but like that's sort of a pattern where you get pluses for things you've added and minuses for things that you've subtracted. And like if we get rid of, I don't know, this, which would be dumb, but then you can see the changes. You also can click this copy all changes and copy it and then come over to wherever and like paste it. And later, I hope the plan, I think last time I talked to this team, the DevTools team, the plan was to actually add some more features where you'd be able to like export the changes into a file and then even email that file to somebody, and they could like just simply click on the file and it would like open Firefox and apply the changes, and so that you could more easily, if you're a developer, send ideas of changes to someone who's maybe a designer or a stakeholder or a client and be like, what do you think of this? And they could look at the real website with the CSS changes applied and stuff like that. But we're not going to do that right now. We're going to do layout. So I want to use this layout panel. And here in the layout panel, I can click and see my grid. But also, I want to see CSS and layout panel at the same time. So this is a button, this like thing in the middle here. This I think we're calling it the three-pane button or something. And now I can see all three things at once, which is super helpful, especially if you're doing things like changing your fonts or ooh, we've got variable fonts. That's a whole other talk. Look here, just really quick, I'll deviate. Variable fonts, instead of width being 100, 200, 300, your width could be like anything. And you know that, how did I even know that this was possible? Because I'm using the Firefox font editor, and the Firefox font editor will list any kind of variable fonts that you have along with sliders, and you can adjust them and make changes. Kind of cool. But let's look at layout. Focus, Jen, focus. So let's, hold on, body margin. Let's make this 2 rem so we can see what we're doing with things not up against the edge of the page. Actually, I want to make it, let's make it 4 rem. 4 rem, now we've got that, now we got a little bit of space. And we can also here turn on display line numbers. And I can zoom in, although it's less. This is what the bugs are. The bugs are in the zooming. So they're tiny, but hopefully you can kind of see them, like 1, 2, 3, right? So over here, I was like sort of numbering my lines. Well, these numbers are going to correspond to what's going on over here. And I could also do things like, see, I want to get into the DOM, into that place where the header is, but rather than digging, I'm just going to click on this little target, and it's going to open this and automatically jump me to there. I can also turn the grid on and off by clicking the word grid right here. Or I can click on this waffle icon. Like, there's all kinds of ways to get to it really quick. So let's look at the image. We're going to want to put the image, we're going to start on column line 2, and we're going to go to column line 6, I think. So let's go header, header image, grid column 2/6, is that what I said? Yeah, so now the image is going to move to where it's actually starting on column line 2 and going to line 6, although it doesn't, right, like it doesn't take up the whole space because I don't have any sort of width 100% on it or anything. Maybe we should add that. Probably, if I was taking more time with this, I wouldn't necessarily do it right away. I'd probably see if I wanted to leave the image as a fixed size image for a little while, but hey, why not just go ahead and do that for now. Although if we do that, we're going to need a line 6 here and a line 7 here. So yeah, let's do it that way. And now you might have noticed that I didn't actually define my grid. I forgot to. So I said display grid, but I didn't define the columns or anything. It basically is just making up the number of columns. It's trying to just guess what number of columns we need. So I don't know, let's just go with that for a while. It made a 6th column, I'm sorry, it didn't even make a 6th column, it made a 6th line, a 6th line, column line, because I told it to extend to column line 6. So it's like, oh, I guess we need a column line 6 here, let me make one for you. So the grid is guessing what we want, and it's doing a pretty good job so far. One of the things, if you did use Bootstrap or 960.js or any of the other many grid systems out in the world, you're probably used to doing what I was just doing with my words, which is thinking of the column as 1 and the column as 2 and the column as 3, but the reality is that in grid, you got to wipe that idea away if you have that old idea, and instead the lines are what are numbered. So this is line 1, line 2, line 3. So if we say, please go from 1 to 2, going from 1 to 2 is going to go from line 1 to line 2, which is just 1 column wide. Where in those old systems, if you said go from 1 to 2, it would go from column 1 to column 2, which would be 2 columns wide. That was probably the first thing that I tripped over as I was learning grid 3 years ago, is like, I kept being like, why is it never what I think it's going to be? And like, oh, because the numbering is different. So you just have to like throw away that old information. And if you never learn those systems, then good for you. You don't have to unlearn anything. You didn't know it in the first place. You can ignore everything I just said. So let's look at this little thing down here, this text. We're going to go from, oh, look, we need, oh, no. We're going to need a line right here. So this is going to be 3, and this is going to be, already I'm making mistakes. This is going to be 4. This is going to be 5. This is going to be 6, 7. This is going to be 8. So let me go move that image. The image is going to go from 2 to 7. And we can see that, oh, look, now it has 7 lines. It just scooted them over. And it's sort of randomly. I'm not going to talk about why, because, oh, I only got 20 minutes left. But I'm not going to talk about exactly why these are the width they are. These are the width they are. But it has to do with how much content is in each one and what's going on with the rest of the content. So we're going to take that text. We're going to go from line 1 to line 3. What's it called? Tagline. Nice class there. Good job. All right. Ding, ding, bing, bing, bing. What's that? What did I do wrong already? I what? Oh, you're welcome. Good. I thought you were fixing my mistakes. By the way, if you see audience participation, if you see mistakes, please feel free to shout them out. It's super helpful. 3. OK, so we're going from 1 to 3 with that text. So it's going to go from 1 to 3, just like I told it. But look at that. What's up with this? So also what's happening is this is here, and this is here, and this is here. Why? So I want that way down there on row line 6, which is here in blue. And I want the image to start on row line 3. No, row line 2. So what's happening is, what it's doing is it's taking the first thing, which is this, and the second thing, and the third thing, and it's putting one here, and one here, and one here. And what it's trying to do, what it was doing before I started saying things like be a certain width, like let's take off that stuff I just wrote, the columns. right now, it only has one column. Grid is just like, well, you didn't say anything about how many columns you want, so I just have one. I'm always going to start with just one unless I have a reason to make more. It takes the first item and puts it in the first cell. It takes the second item and puts it in the second cell. It takes the third item and puts it in the third cell, and it says, you're welcome. By the way, the very original version of CSS Grid, which was written in, it's put 910. It was like written in 2012 or 2010 or something. It's super old. It just piles everything up in the first cell in the corner. It's just like, I don't know where to put it, so I'm just going to shove everything into cell number 1. And you're like, that's not what I wanted ever. So the CSS working group invented a better way to do it. And they're like, well, when you don't say anything, we're just going to put 1 and 1 and 1 and 1. And oh, we'll just. So what it's doing, Backblaze, go away. What it's doing is it's just placing one thing in each thing. So, and it's making up rows as it needs. And like, so if we actually come into the CSS and we do say grid template columns 1FR, we'll just do it this way. Repeat. How many we said we're going to need? 8. We're going to need 8 lines, which is we're going to want to repeat this pattern 7 times. We're going to say repeat 7 1FR, which will give us 7 columns. Then it's given us 7 columns. We've got 8 lines, and it's taking the first thing and putting it in the first cell, and it's taking the second thing and putting it in the second cell, and it's taking the third thing and putting it in the third cell. Because these things that I removed before are back because I refreshed the page. So let's remove them. So what it's doing is it's just like one in the first cell, another one in the second cell, another one in the third cell. Ooh, I'm done. So that's not what we want, of course, but it's just interesting to know that this is what's happening. And it's making all of these columns be the same width because I've told them to all be 1FR. Now, if I said I want them to all be auto, then it's going to like, oh, yeah, see, I should have just commented that out so it wouldn't keep that code wouldn't keep coming back. Then it's going to make this be the like max content length, and then it's actually also making this be the max content length, and then just giving the image whatever's left over space. This is why I like prototyping in code, and this is why I like not really knowing what I'm doing and just playing and playing and playing, because I learn things about grid and how it works, and I start to get ideas about my design as I play. The way that maybe you would have in the past played in InDesign or in Photoshop, or if you've ever had a happy accident as a designer in those other programs, you can have those kind of happy accidents in CSS. Row 2 and go to row 7. So let's put the image on grid row 2/7, and now it's here. And now it took that image and like it took this text and it shoved it in the left, like in the space that's like the next available space, especially since it knows it has to go from line 1 to line 3. It's like, well, I guess I'll put it down here. It's sort of rearranging the puzzle pieces. And actually, we want this piece to go from 1 to 3 and from 6 to 7. So let's write that code. 1 to 3, grid row 6 to 7. And it's going to put it here, although that's also not really what I want. I want it to be higher up. So maybe I do need to add, there's a couple ways I could do this. I could just put a min height on that text and be like, min height of, I don't know, 40 viewport height units, in which case it's going to put it up there. I could make another row and do something to define that this row should have a height, but I don't know. Let's come back to that later. So grid are our friends. It's starting in this 1, 1. Which is actually where this word grids is going to start. So let's move on to that, because that's going to be the fun part. My columns are still auto. Yeah, I think maybe we'll leave it that way for now. Thanks. That's a good thing to think about. Let's think about that later. Grids are our friends. So this H1, header H1, we're going to say display grid, and then we're going to say grid template columns subgrid. And what this is doing, if we if things are, yeah. So now we have a second grid, which is now in blue. Can you see? You can't see that. I wish these lines were thicker. So our original grid is in orange, and our new grid is in blue. And oh, you know what? OK, so I need to take this grids are our friends, and I need to tell it where to go. So it's going to need to go from, this is going to be an 8 down here. It needs to go from 1 to 8. Ooh, this is way out here. This is going to be number 9. So we're going to need 9. We're going to need 9. We're going to want this header to go, header H1 to go from grid column, what did I say, 1 to 9? So it needs to go from, because I need the headline to like cover this whole thing. So it needs to go from line 1 to line 9 and from line 1 to line 8 in the row direction. One of my favorite things about CSS Grid is that you can overlap things. And that's exactly what we're doing right now. So now it's even harder to see what's going on. But oh, you know what I'm going to do to make it a little smaller is I'm going to actually make this image be tiny for now, just to, yeah. Wow, what are those lines? Oh, those are row lines stacked up on top of each other. There's a whole bunch of them. Why did that happen? Let's make this image a little bit bigger. So what's going on is, so now you can see that the image is here on the grid, and the paragraph is there on the grid. And see how the paragraph is overlapping the image? And now the header is there on the grid, and it's overlapping the whole thing. That's cool. Overlap is cool. People keep saying, oh, HTML tables, or CSS Grid, ooh, CSS Grid, just like HTML tables. I did that back in the day. I don't know what the big deal is. I don't see what the big, it's totally different. And the number one thing that's different about it is because you can overlap things. Anybody write code with HTML tables only before CSS came along? You remember chopping up your images into little tiny pieces and sticking them into a whole bunch of cells? Welcome to still never doing that again. If we want our image to overlap our text, we just make our image overlap our text. We don't have to chop the image up into little pieces and puzzle piece it around those horrible days. We don't want to remember that either. So it's not the same. People writing blog posts at Google. Just because they work for Google doesn't mean they know what they're talking about. So grids are our friends. Look at this interesting thing that I didn't know I just learned for the first time ever. Because now we have subgrid, and subgrid is taking these little words, the word grid, and it's putting it in the first cell. And then it's like, ooh, there's something in the second cell. I think I'll skip that, please. And it's taking, oh, wait, no, it didn't skip it. It put the word R behind it. Look at that. So if you're wondering how can we get the word R to go in front, even though we don't want, oh, we do want to in the end, right? We want all these words to be in front. So we're going to do header span, z-index. What do we want, a negative number or a positive number? I think we want a positive number. You think I would know? Oh, yes, look, OK, there we go. Also, I'm going to, let's really quickly give the image an opacity of 75%, just so that it gets lighter and we can see a little bit. Oh, that screwed up the Z. Did that screw up the Z-index? What did that do? Oh, it just didn't work because it's badly written. Oh, 0.75. Did I tell you I'm on the CSS working group? OK, so now our image is a little bit lighter just so that the contrast is a little bit better. And in case anything goes behind it, we'll see those things just temporarily. And we can see the words grid are our friends. And what do we want to do? So we want the word R to start on column 4. Let's see if we're going to nth child this. So span colon nth dash child. I probably should use an nth of type, but 2. And let's see if we grid column. What do we want? I have the memory of a hamster, apparently. 4 to 8. 4/8. All right, did that work? I think it might have worked. Oh, it didn't. You know why? Because the numbering starts over, although it didn't matter in this case. But also, I learned about a couple hours ago that the numbering starts over. So if you're on the subgrid, like if our subgrid started not on line 1, if it started on line 3, the numbers are going to start over. So what am I saying? I'm saying that like, so this starts on line 1, but if we just made this go to like column line 3, then the subgrid would start on line 3 on the main grid, and the numbering starts over, so that our numbers on our subgrid, which is kind of cool, because it means that you can move your item that's been subgridded around the grid, maybe at different breakpoints or something, or as you're experimenting, and the numbers for the layout that's inside that subgrid container you don't have to keep writing those numbers over and over again. They're referencing themselves. But that still isn't why. Yeah, I think maybe it's just because my rows aren't actually the sizes that I want them to be yet, because we haven't changed them from auto. And then we're going to want this to go from 6 to 8. So let's take this and go nth child 3. We're going to go 6 to, is it 8? It seems like, oh yeah, it is 8. OK. And it jumped down in rows. It's a little random why these are in these rows. Oh, because it's going after, I don't know. Friends, we wanted to go from 7 to 8, and we wanted to go column 4. So let's do nth child 4. We're going to go from, where did I say? From 4 to 8 in columns. 4 to 8 in columns and grid. By the way, I always go back later and put row first and column second and organize my code. 7 to 8? Yeah, 7, 8. Is that kind of getting us? I mean, it's sort of, you get the idea, right? So here's another thing. Grids and hour are turned sideways. So let's do that next. What we're going to want to do is, by the way, you may be wondering, some of you are probably wondering, how come we didn't place this one, right? Well, it's because it's going from 1 to 2. Oh, but we do need to place it. So it's going to go from column 1 to 2, which we don't have to say, because if we say nothing, it's going to start at grid column 1, and it's going to go one span, one track. So that's where we want it to be. So we just sort of said something that's super redundant. But we do want it to go from row line 1 to 4. So let's do that, 1/4. I probably didn't change much, but you can kind of see that it's filling up that space if it was going to fill up that space. Turning it sideways. So we're going to use a thing called writing mode. And we're going to go vertical RL, which is going to turn it sideways. Now, vertical RL is for writing text that wants to be written in a vertical direction, like Chinese, Japanese, Korean, and any other CJK family, CJK script related kind of cousin script. That's not what we're doing at the moment. I think actually a much better way to do this would be to use writing mode sideways, and we could then do sideways, I think it's sideways LR is what we're going to want. That's what we're going to want, right? The problem with sideways LR is that it's not very well supported. It's only supported in Firefox. So the other way to do this is to, so that it works in other browsers, is to then say transform, rotate 180 degrees. Transform, rotate, so there, boom. Now, I also could, if I want, I could like put in here an @support statement and say, if you support writing mode sideways RL, then I want you to use sideways RL, and oh, by the way, don't transform rotate. And then I kind of have the code for both. Now the question would be like, why do you need to do that? Well, why? Because it makes a nice little demo to show all y'all how like I'm using code that isn't supported in every browser. Here's the code that would work in all the browsers that support writing modes and transforms, which is at the moment like 97, 93%, most browsers. Not all browsers, so we got to figure out what to do for the ones that don't. But for the ones that do, we can then say, OK, well, here's a little bit of code, although we should take this out so that works. If you support this property, then do these things instead. That's a principle that you want to use all the time, and that's how you can start using CSS Grid today, even if you're supporting browsers that don't support CSS Grid. So then the word R, we're also going to do writing mode, LR, vertical LR. I think it's this one, right? And we don't have to spin it around because it's supposed to be this direction anyway. So yeah, like they're starting to look sort of like it's supposed to, right? Except for the fact that the lines aren't really where we want them to be. How much time do I have? 3 minutes! Yeah, so here I could even display none, this pull quote. Not very good use of my last 90 seconds, but OK. So then the question really is, how are we going to define like the sizing of things? And what we want to do is not do repeat auto or repeat 1FR. Let's just see what happens if we switch to the repeat 1FR. What it's going to do is it's going to make all these tracks the exact same size as each other. That's interesting. Well, it's not exactly, because it does have a little bit of adjustment based on the amount of content that's inside things. But really what we want to do is start coming in here, right? So we probably want to define these two. See, we could make these min content, except we do want this to be a little bit more wrappy. But let's see what happens if we. All right, so there I just, basically it's the exact same thing. It's repeating this pattern 8 times. But if I say min content, it's going to make that be as small as it possibly can be. Oh, we need the word grids to span across 2 rows. I mean, I'm sorry, two columns, 2 column tracks. Actually, we're going to want this to be, I bet you we're going to want this to be a certain M. Like, how big is our headline? Now I'm going to go over time. I'm using up your questions. Let me just finish this part up. If we make this 4 rem, the headline itself, then maybe we can make this track be 2 rem and kind of get that sort of thing going, right? We're also going to need to come in here and make these rows. These rows don't have any height to them, so they're collapsing into 0. So we're going to need to like come in here and start stacking up some numbers for rows, like make these rows not collapse so that these things don't end up on top of each other, which is why they're doing that. I bet you that's why they're doing that now. But you get the idea, right? So we're going to need to come in here and sort of adjust the way that the tracks are being described. This here, we're probably going to need to come in here and do a grid template rows and start to define it so that it actually has sizing, which starts to get into stuff around sizing and understanding like all the options for defining the sizes of rows. But hopefully that was helpful. Oh, look, I have 53 seconds left. I'll give it to you in questions. Let's talk about questions.